Welcome to the Aging Well podcast. I'm Jeff Armstrong here with Corbin Bruton. In this and the episodes that follow, we will share candid discussions on aging and hear from the experts. We are here to inform and encourage as we experience, aging. Welcome to the Aging Well podcast. In this episode, we're going a little bit different pathway. I have a guest co-host today, and she's going to be interviewing me. My guest today is Jennifer Kem. And Jennifer, let's just start by having you introduce yourself.
Hey, how are you? Thank you so much for having me on your podcast. I really appreciate it, Jeff. The opportunity to be able to talk with you about aging is very exciting to me. As you know, I write a blog and I do a little bit of podcasting on the side as well. And my main interest in the blog is elderly, senior citizens and that sort of thing, and helping them figure out how they can age well now because they're already seniors. But I think my main interest is trying to help those that are younger than us, trying to help them age well. And I think that is I would just find it fascinating. Is that your passion?
I guess it's become my passion, yeah. And I think it's kind of a self-challenge as well, that I want to kind of prove to my students that the stuff that I teach is the stuff that's going to help them to perform better as they age. And so, yeah, I think it's become a passion. And I teach a pathophysiology and exercise class too. So the more I've taught that class, the more I realize, crap, if we just do these few things, we can age so much better, prevent so much of this disease. And so much more on a pursuit of kind of learning the things that we can do to literally age well. So what questions do you have for me?
Well, let's go back just a little bit to exactly what you stated. Oh my gosh, that's phenomenal. So tell me a little bit about your students and tell me where they are at in life and why it is that they are looking. I just have so much just right there. You just have action-packed answer right there.
So my students are kind of a wide range. We have a lot that will go into physical therapy. So that's kind of their interest, or occupational therapy, which is a new program at Western Oregon University. We have a lot that go into personal training. I'm just a pretty diverse group. I'd love to have a lot more of them go into medicine. That's probably one of the reasons I really push the pathophysiology class, because I want physicians that are much more proactive as opposed to reactive. And so we have a pretty wide range of students. And my goal is to try and really emphasize to them that the lifestyle choices we make early in life are going to have a long impact on how we age, how we perform beyond just sports, beyond our 20s and our early years of kind of just getting buff for the other, the other sex, and so it's really just trying to educate them a little bit more on the possibilities.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. I love it so much. All right, so tell me some of I guess I kind of read into that. Let me rephrase it just in case. You've got some hacks.
I don't like the word hacks when it comes to aging. And that's one of the big things I kind of fight against, is that it's not hacks. It's not easy routes. There's not pills to take. There's not these quick fixes to body composition, to muscle mass, any of that kind of stuff. It takes effort. It takes work. It takes good programming. It takes conscious choices that we make in order to age well.
Oh, that's so true. I mean, if you can't get yourself to the gym by just having a gym membership, that's just
right.
Many. And you know that probably better than anybody. How many times have you had somebody that had told you, oh, I got a gym membership, but then you realize that, they don't really go pay the money every month.
We did an episode a while back. It was actually a presentation I did for my friend Sandy Griffin and her 12-week transformation that she does annually. And my topic was finding your why not. Because we often, we tell people you got to find your why. Well, the why gets you the gym membership, but the why not gets you in the gym. And so we talk about that a lot on the podcast. It's like, what is keeping you from doing these things? And step by step, those little baby steps is how we get to kind of chipping away at those why nots and getting to the point where we can be more effective in aging.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with that. There's no easy route. Absolutely not an easy route to anything that you do anyway. I really am a strong believer in that. Absolutely. I am the kind of person that will get up in the morning and just do whatever needs to be done. Yeah, my situation, I won't go into that. But my goodness, it is so hard to motivate somebody else that you're supposed to motivate. Holy moly. That's just, and how do you find that why not in somebody else? Do you have some key phrases that you ask them?
I don't know that I do. I mean, that's the holy grail of exercise science, is finding the way to motivate people to want to do these things. And if we could figure that out, we wouldn't have a population that, 50% are not exercising at all, and almost 75% of the population isn't meeting the, kind of daily minimum guidelines for physical activity, let alone the quality of exercise they need to do to really improve performance.
Oh, absolutely. Oh my goodness, it is super difficult to find that external motivation if the internal motivation is, oh gosh, I don't know how to describe it, complacent or lax or constantly coming up with an excuse. It is so difficult. Those external motivators are, I imagine, in physical therapy and occupational therapy, both those external motivators have got to be difficult for the giver of the therapy to give to the receiver of the therapy. I mean, bringing somebody coming in that doesn't really want to be there, doesn't really want to do the work, that is the toughest. Yeah, it is got to be the toughest. Do you have any students that you know of that thrive at this kind of thing?
I'm sure there's some. I'm trying to think of some that I could identify specifically, but there is a certain level of personality that comes with being able to do that effectively. And I do think a lot of people go into some of the rehabilitation fields without really having a good sense of being able to manage some of those behaviors. So, yeah, I think that's one of the things that somebody has to consider when they're going into that field. Do I have that personality? And honestly, I don't have that personality. That's why I think I went into academia instead of becoming, a world-renowned personal trainer, because I didn't enjoy, you know, going to the gym every day and trying to push people through and just having to kind of listen to their excuses and, just be counting their repetitions for them. I always felt like, this is something I can teach you the basics, but you should be able to graduate beyond having to pay me to do this. And that's probably why I'm poor too. It's because I didn't figure out how to make a lot of money doing this. But it does take a special personality. And if somebody has that personality, I think they really should go into the field and make the most of it and try and really motivate people. Hopefully we're doing a little bit better job through this podcast and educating people and motivating through that. But I find I'm a better motivator as an educator as opposed to a hands-on, more skilled practitioner.
Yeah, I feel like your talents would be wasted on a single individual, really. And you reach so many more people through your podcast. It's really what you're
I'd like to
doing.
reach more.
Exactly. You reach so many more people and motivate them that way. But being that face-to-face one-on-one, it does feel like you're wasting your efforts and energy on the single person because they internally need to motivate first and foremost. And how do you give somebody that internal motivation and help them get to that point where you're obviously internally motivated? You have started this podcast. You write a blog. You teach. You do so many things. Am I leaving anything out? That
I don't think so.
Dad,
I kind of look at one of the things when I taught a motivation and adherence class, we talk about the stages of change. And you go from the pre-contemplation to contemplation to preparation to action to maintenance. And what really occurred to me is that so many people are stuck in that pre-contemplation stage because we're just not educated well enough in terms of what we need to do to manage our health. A lot of people, probably the vast majority of Americans, are under the guidance of their physician as opposed to somebody who is more of a proactive, influencer in their exercise and their diet and everything else. And we're kind of resigned to just following after what we've always done. And it takes just kind of getting past that initial ignorance of what we need to be doing and spark that interest in terms of learning a little bit more. And then once we start to learn a little bit more, we start to develop that why rather than why not. And we start kind of chipping away at the obstacles. And there are a lot of obstacles that Americans have that keep them from exercising. And I think that's one of the things we have to focus on as communities, creating an atmosphere that makes it easier for people to exercise, because there are a lot of people that want to do it. They know they have to do it, but there are barriers that they haven't figured out their way past. And so once we kind of get them interested in learning and understanding what they need to do, now we have to start looking, okay, how do we get rid of those barriers? How do we address those, get them into that contemplation stage, and then eventually get them into the action stage where they get the gym membership and they're actually using it and starting to see results in, get through those initial couple weeks of exercise that are hard, where you're trying to learn things and it's more difficult and you're more willing to give up. And so once we get them into that action phase, it's generally a lot easier. And then maintenance phase, I don't like the maintenance phase. I always think that we should be continually progressing. There's always more that we can do, but that's kind of how it's taught in motivation circles is, you have the maintenance phase. We maintain that healthy behavior. And it's a challenge.
Yeah, it is a challenge. I agree with you that maintenance phase gets a bit, I don't know. I like the learning phase. I like to layer on something more, every single time, making sure that even if it's just arm curls, why not make the arm curl just a little bit different so that you can address just a slightly different strand of muscle inside of there. I mean, it doesn't really take a lot to just change it up a tiny bit to keep in the learning phase while still maintaining the maintenance phase. But just keep layering on, make it just a little bit different so your body strains just a little bit more.
Yeah, and I think one of the big issues we face too with aging is that physical activity and physical education has gotten really, really weak at the K through 12 level. We're not stressing it well enough. We are almost even discouraging it because, it's not safe to be out in your neighborhoods playing as a child. And, we like when my daughter, remember Ayla, when she was going to elementary school and middle school, the bus literally stops at the end of both ends of a block at the end of our cul-de-sac. So she walks maybe 3 houses to the bus stop and gets on, but there are kids the next cul-de-sac over that aren't walking any further than that. And it's like, why not make these kids walk a little bit further? Have one bus stop in the area and give them a little bit more physical activity. There's no way for kids to bike to school because the roads just aren't built that way and they're not safe for them to do that. And when I was a kid, and I was blessed to live in a community that had, sidewalks, and we all walked to school. I had friends that would walk as much as a mile to school. When I was in elementary school, both elementary schools were kind of centered in two halves of the community. And so there were some kids that might have to walk almost a half a mile to school and a half mile home, but they'd also went home for lunch. So these kids were back and forth several times a day. We got so much more activity, and we biked anywhere. You parents didn't care. Get out, get on your bike, and I'm going 5 miles away, no problem. Go, get out of the house. I don't want to see you until sundown. And today they don't do that. And a lot of it is parents not feeling that it's safe for their kids outside. Some of it is just there's too many distractions. There's YouTube, Instagram, there's TikTok, there's playing on their iPads, there's television. I mean, we had television, but there was only a handful of stations. So what else are we going to do? I mean, cartoons were on for a couple hours, maybe after school, but then there's, it was all adult shows. And so society has changed quite a bit that really prevents us or limits us from exercising. So we need to kind of reverse some of that. Diet's a whole other big issue that has changed over the years. And we just need to become much more proactive, I believe, in terms of educating and making healthy choices much more accessible to people as they're aging. And then we're not going to be worried about getting into our mid 40s and suddenly realizing I'm getting older and I need to start exercising. I need to start changing my habits. Because at that point, not that it's too late. I mean, it's never too late to make those changes. You just had 45 years that you could have been living a much better life that's going to give you a lot more years down the road.
Yeah, totally agree. Oh my goodness. It's important to be able to age well when you start aging well in the very beginning. You know, it's so much easier. I remember fun runs. Do you remember activity days or fun runs where the entire school would get together and you would compete at racing and baseball and all of those other little activities that we do? I mean, I don't know if anybody plays baseball anymore in the elementary level, but I remember in fourth grade, we were playing baseball. We were great.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you see the pickup games as much as you did when I was a kid. And, we had, baseball was a community thing. I played baseball for a couple years. I was horrible at it. Um, but, I still participated. They kind of stuck me in right field so that, somebody else could catch the ball. But, we had that. And the majority of boys my age would be playing. We had youth football, and that was localized. So we only played against guys within the community. So it wasn't these travel teams that we see. That I think a lot of that discourages kids from being more physically active because it's now you got to kind of make a team and it's travel teams. It takes more expenses. And it's just not something we do regularly. And I think one positive change that has come in those decades has been that there's much more access for physical activity for girls. When I was, in like elementary school, middle school, about the only thing they really had for the girls, I don't even think they had they might have had some youth softball, but they started a track club in Dormont where I grew up. And my sisters all did that. I mean, my youngest sister was a phenomenal runner. I mean, had she not had some issues with her feet, she was predicted to be one of the first women running an Olympic marathon. She was that good. And she was competing against that level of, that caliber. In fact, there was one girl that was on her team that was not one of the best runners at the time, but she ended up, when they did start preparing for the first women's Olympic run, a marathon run, she was, I think, ranked 16th in the nation. So there's a really good quality of runners in that group, but that was a community thing. And they did do traveling for that, but it was, everybody participated and there was a huge number of girls involved in that program. Now, we're starting to see more growth in women's sports. Wrestling has become very popular for women, and I wholeheartedly support that. That was not something that was easily accessible for girls when I was in high school. But, we see more activity for girls. I think females are becoming much more active younger than they were in earlier generations, which is having, I think, some long-term benefits for the females. I do tend to think we're going to see reductions in the rates of osteoporosis in some of these current generations than we saw in our parents' generations. But I think the men are going to see more declining health issues. We're going to see, more, we see more obesity in males. We're seeing heart disease. We're seeing more cancers. We're seeing possibly even more osteoporosis because men are sitting more and more on their butts at computers rather than doing more physical labor. And so I think we have to really start looking at what are we doing to our younger people that's going to impact their ability to age well. And it's going to have a huge price tag with it if we don't do something about it. I mean, you look at childhood obesity, childhood diabetes, type 1 diabetes, but type 2 diabetes in children is increasing dramatically. And that needs to be fixed.
Absolutely. Oh my goodness, yeah. I remember pickup games at recess, fourth grade. You just grab the bats and the balls and you just head out to the field. It's not that big of a thing, but I don't see that a whole lot anymore. I've had a lot of children that I've taken care of in the past that just, when they go to school, it's just not there. But then when they come home, we're always doing something. I mean, there's always, the kids get used to not saying this phrase, "I'm so bored." Nobody says that around me.
Well,
Oh, nobody says that because we always have something to do. Yeah, it's amazing how that's changed. You go to the recess playgrounds now and people are just sitting and talking and they're not really getting up and moving and running around. I remember we would run around the entire playground. It was just a cement. It was cement out and chain link, and that's all it was. And
That's what we had.
we didn't have grassy fields, nothing like that. We didn't have access to any of that stuff. It was funny because when they first installed, they did bake sales. The PTA did all these bake sales and bought a Jello gym for the kids. They had to jackhammer the concrete and get down to a place where they could put a rubber mat down. And then, I mean, this is how we people think that we need to replicate nature. So we put down a rubber mat and then wood chips. And then after the wood chips, then they could install the playground. But before that, we had jungle bars and we had a pitcher's gate so that we could play baseball. And we had one of those metal domes, it was the geometric dome that you would crawl around on.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And then we had bars, and that was about it.
Yeah, we had the monkey bars over asphalt, and it was just basically almost like a parking lot that was chain link fenced off. And then we had a couple other, there was just a kind of cement area back behind the school that we'd play on as well. There's no grass, absolutely no grass. And we had this one little nook kind of by where the arts area was, between the arts and the gym. And we used to make up games to play in there. I remember playing this game, handball, that we made up. We had our own rules for it, and everybody played it before school and at lunchtime and after school. I mean, we were constantly just active and playing.
Yeah. And the reason that I go back in time like that is because there's some sort of an internal motivation that was passed on to us through that. Because we would just come up to a kid that was a stranger and we'd say, hey, you want to play? And they would. And we would go and play. And then somebody else would join us. And then we're all playing. So it's just like, what was that? Where did that go with our kids now? And where do we get that? And how do we give it?
Yeah, I have no idea. And I guess for me, I was kind of fortunate that, I was kind of growing up kind of in that post-Kennedy era, where he had created the President's Council on Physical Fitness, and there was much more of a push to get people physically active. I mean, it certainly was kind of selfish purposes on behalf of our government to kind of make better potential soldiers. But, it spawned a lot of people kind of working out and exercising much more. And, we had much more interest in sports. And maybe that too is because I grew up in Pittsburgh where, we had the Steelers, the Pirates, and the Penguins were all really, really good during my youth. And so that kind of prompted a lot more interest in sports activities. But I don't know where it went. We've lost that somewhere along the way. Hopefully, maybe we're starting to gain it back a little bit more. I do see kind of a resurgence in my generation in terms of wanting to be physically active. They're suddenly waking up now in their 60s saying, yeah, I got to start doing more. I got to start lifting weights. I got to start, doing a little bit more cardio. I got to start looking at my diet. But somewhere we kind of fell away from that, and then we're coming back to it. But the youth, we really got to get the youth. If we're going to have a population age as well, we have to get started early.
Yeah, I do agree. I agree with you 100% on that. Yeah, and how do we get the youth on board to understand that diet doesn't mean calling up Uber and ordering whatever's out there?
Right.
Yeah, that's not how it works. I mean, especially since they could just walk down. It's only a mile away. Just go pick it up yourself. Yeah.
Of course, COVID really messed us up with that too. We got in a habit of having things delivered to us during COVID, and we got to kind of break that as well.
Yeah, that's actually a good idea, really. Why not get out and get on the bicycle and get back into it? And now with the resurgence of electric bikes, which I think they're great. They're super fun. But at the same time, and I just rode an electric bike with a friend of mine. We went for several miles out here in the Sandy Confluence. And this bike was absolutely amazing. And we're out there in the sand dunes. And I'm trying to wrangle this 80-pound bike. And I don't weigh much more than 80 pounds, but I'm trying to wrangle it through these sand dunes. That just alone was a workout. maybe more so than my regular bike, but I wouldn't have been able to ride my regular bike out there. I would
True.
have been floundering. But my gosh, it was amazing to see how many people were just, I want to say, barely walking. There wasn't a stride, there was just a shuffle. It was absolutely amazing to see that their walk wasn't even an energetic, muscle engaging walk. And I was like, wow, did they miss that? Where, you just want to like keep your body posture up and straight and actually walk with your hip muscles and your full body. I mean, what do you see when you see people's gait, since you work with this quite often?
That's one of my worst habits is driving and watching people run or walk and kind of critiquing their form and technique.
Yeah.
I feel like I just want to pull over and educate them. Like you said, a lot of people that, I mean, God bless them, they're trying to exercise and they're jogging, but it's like you're doing so much more harm to your joints by trying to run the way you're running. Whereas you could probably go that same pace in a good brisk walk and get better benefits without tearing up your joints. And then you see the people that, and I always joke that if you can hold a hot cup of Starbucks coffee in your hand while you're walking, you are not exercising, right? And a lot of people, they just, and again, it's physical activity, which is great. We want to encourage that. But if that's what you think exercise is, you're not going to see tremendous health benefits that you could get from exercise. You're just basically just keeping a little bit ahead of the people that are totally sedentary. And so we want to encourage people exercising more. And, it could be a brisk walk. It doesn't have to be a run. I think that's one of the things that came out of the 80s. I think that is somewhat detrimental is that we built this culture of running where everybody has to run. They want to run marathons. They want to run 5Ks, 10Ks, which is great, but it's not for everybody. And when people realize that they are not really suited to running a marathon, then what else do I have to do for exercise? And if they do kind of revert back to walking, it's more of a casual walk as opposed to kind of a brisk, healthier walk. And so I think we need to educate people as well on what really healthy forms of exercise that we can do more and what types of physical activities are going to give us the most benefit rather than just the minimal benefit.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And starting with walking is it's a good starting point. I mean, what are some of the things that you see? Just maybe your top two things that when you see somebody walk, they're doing that thing and you're like, no, don't do that thing.
I think they're either walking too slow. Generally, I mean, I don't see many problems with walking other than that they're probably walking too slow. When I see the running, I see just really poor arm mechanics, or they're swinging the hips too much, too little. Their strides are rather short, but they're in that running gait where they're impacting more. But if they just lengthened out their stride a little bit more, kept it as a walk, they'd be harming themselves less. And then I see people with just weird arm swings. This is one guy I see run pretty regularly when I take Ayla to school, and he basically keeps these long straight arms and he just swings them at his sides like pendulums, but they're not in sync with his legs. And it's like, how is that happening? Because that can't be good for you. But I think in defense of these people, I think going out and moving even poorly is better than not moving at all. Now, can we take that movement and refine it a little bit better to reduce the risk of injury, maybe allow them a little bit more intensity in their exercise, get a little bit more benefit out of it? We work on that. But I think the biggest thing first is just getting people moving. 50% of the population isn't exercising at all. Just getting that 50% up off the couch and out moving around their communities is going to be of tremendous benefit. And then once we get them moving, then we start looking at, okay, how can we move better? How can we move more effectively in order to improve performance and improve longevity?
Yeah.
So I think the first thing is just getting people doing. I mean, we could talk about people going to the gym and only lifting the 5-pound dumbbells. That person lifting the 5-pound dumbbells and not progressing is still doing something more than a person sitting on the couch. But again, if you're not progressing and you're not lifting heavier weights, it's not going to benefit you in the long run.
We don't want the people that are doing these exercises to break down so soon that they never exercise, or it's not possible for them to exercise. Yeah, it's kind of a catch-22 when you see somebody out there running and you go, oh my goodness, that's going to be knee surgery in just about a decade. And you wonder, they just don't know. And you're right, it's education at the forefront, and continuing education, like you said, just keeping it in there, not the maintenance mode necessarily, but the educational blend, or the learning mode and the motivation to keep going and continue forward with maintenance and learning.
Yeah. So what are you seeing in the older population that you work with?
Oh my goodness. Like you said, sedentary is just, I'm seeing a lot of people that are excited about their hip replacement and their knee surgery, only to find out that, dear God, it's a lot of work just to get back into the functionality where they were able to just stand and sit with pain. But now they have standing and sitting, and they need to work on their physical therapy, and that motivation from inside just is not there because they didn't have to really work before. So, and that's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing a lot of people that are elderly that are giving up too soon. They're not invited to play. Let's go. You want to go out and do something, and then they realize that they are not able to get up and do anything anymore. It's okay. They're getting through it. But being able to internally motivate is a super important factor for the very elderly. Sadly, we see a lot of people fall. And once they fall, they're more apt to get dementia, or have that. It just sort of, I don't know how to describe this, that internal motivation sort of takes it downward. The knob turns down a little bit, so it's more silent. That internal motivation is. So that's an important thing I see in the elderly. Like, where did their internal motivation go? They used to go out. They used to get up, do stuff outside. But where is it? It's a bit of an interesting thing, and I hope that you and I avoid that. I hope we're always turning up the volume on our energy and our persistence, and continuing to.
That's what I'm trying to do. I keep trying to challenge myself a little bit more. My latest challenge right now is to try and Zercher deadlift off of the ground, which I've kind of adopted the Zercher squat, kind of coaching the wrestlers at Westland High School, and just kind of in my own exercise, I'm finding it to be a much, much better squat exercise for myself, and it's much more functional. I've always, I've seen these guys that can actually scoop up under the bar when it's rested on the ground and lift it up off the ground. And I can't get that low to get under the bar. And I've always kind of attributed it to, or given myself, I guess, the excuse that I'm 6'5", and that's why I can't get down under it, which is part of it. But I'm also realizing I lack a little bit more of the thoracic mobility and the even hip mobility that I need to get down that low. And it's not that bad. And I have fairly decent mobility for my age, but it could be better. And so it's like, okay, well, let's work on improving that. And I'm getting close. I've only been doing them for about a week now, and I'm down to where a few of the repetitions I can actually touch to the ground, but I'm not consistently getting there. It takes a little bit more warm up. But I want to really encourage that kind of rounding of the back, which is something I was just telling a friend earlier today that you don't hear an exercise physiologist say, you got to round your back more. Because we historically have always tell people, neutral spine, focus moving at the hips, you lift with your legs. But the reality is we do need a little bit more of that mobility. We need that strength throughout the spine. We don't need to overdo it. We don't those joints, but we need to maintain that mobility as we attempt to age well. And so that's my new challenge, to try and do that at my age so that, I can show other people, okay, this can still be done.
Yeah. It's hard to realize that all of a sudden you've been doing something and it's a bit stuck. Yeah, that neutral spine and it is really important, but then so are the other, the roached spine is what we call it in horseback riding, roached spine, and the spine that's way too concave.
But yeah,
Yeah, neither one of them in
it's,
horseback riding is good. It's not going to give you basic balanced position, but it is important to have that mobility when you're on the ground and being able to pick something up. Hopefully you won't get stuck.
and from the standpoint of trying to prevent injury as we age, having that greater mobility, being able to move multidirectionally, working on balance. And one of the earlier episodes on the podcast, I had a friend, Carmine Arpea, on, and he was telling me about this equation that they used in his senior living facility for balance. And it was that strength plus posture equals balance. And I really like that. So I actually published it into my Pathophysiology and Exercise book. So it's now a published Carmine's Law. But it really made a lot of sense that in order to improve our balance, we have to focus on not only strength, but we also have to focus on posture, because if we have a more upright posture, we're able to maintain that center of balance a lot more effectively. And so that's been a big emphasis. Most of the students that I teach are going to be anywhere from probably junior, senior year. They're going to physical therapy programs around the country. Most of them tend to, this is Oregon. They don't want to leave Oregon. So they do tend to stay a little bit more local. But there's a lot of competition in getting into this program. So more and more of them are realizing that they need to spread themselves out a little bit more. And then we have an increasing number going into occupational therapy, and then more and more going into PA programs, which I really kind of encourage, because again, that's a more balanced lifestyle than becoming a physician. And it's a little bit easier and less expensive than going to med school, and you make a pretty good salary. Plus, you're going to be much more impactful, because people don't have quite the access to physicians as they used to. And PAs and registered nurses are having a little bit better influence on the individuals that they're treating. And so we have those. We have some that go into more accelerated nursing programs. So we're getting a lot going in the healthcare route. We still have a lot doing strength and conditioning from the more high school, collegiate levels. So I'm kind of wanting to work toward professional sports. I do have in some of my classes a lot more PE instructors. And so trying to educate them to kind of motivate their kids a little bit more effectively. What other areas do we have? We have a fair number that want to work with geriatric populations. And so, they're looking at maybe becoming activity directors in senior communities, or just simply, training and working with older adults. So we have a fair number of personal trainers and those types of individuals. I hope not money, because still, unfortunately, being on the preventative side, there's not as much money to be made as there is on the more reactive side. But I think for a lot of them, they have, particularly those that go into physical therapy or even athletic training, they've had injuries that have prompted them want to pursue a more rehabilitation side, or they've had family members that have. Some kind of going into physical therapy, I do think recognize that there is a bit more money to be made in that area. And so they might be a little bit more financially motivated. I think it's pretty wide. You'll have all kind of different motivations for why people pick the careers that they are choosing. I'm just glad we're starting to see more and more individuals picking exercise science as a career and the various options that stem from that, because there are a kind of plethora of different things that you can do with an exercise science degree. And that's one of the things that I encourage with my students. It's like, you can get through this degree and get to the end and suddenly change your mind what you want to do with it. And you're not, well, what am I going to do? I have to go back and take more classes, or I have to change my major, or do any of those types of things. You can make those adjustments much later. I had one student who he was really gearing up towards strength and conditioning. And that's what we were preparing for. And he gets into his senior year, and suddenly he's like, I really want to go clinical. And so I kind of put together an ECG class for him. We worked on that individually, because we don't offer an ECG class. And he went into his master's program in clinical exercise physiology. And I think he's changed to something else even since then. But those options are there. If you're thinking physical therapy the whole way through, And then suddenly you get to the end and like, athletic training sounds really cool to me. I think I might want to do that. They can do that as well. And so for me, I'm just happy to be educating as many people in the preventative side of health and aging well as possible. I've been doing this for 25 years. I don't know how many I've probably educated over those years. Probably over those years, at least in the thousands overall. We have one of the largest majors on campus. And so, we have quite a few students going through every year. And, so it's in the hundreds. What got me going in this direction? I think, it all started in high school. Working at a Steel City. Nautilus was the name of the facility. When I was in high school, Nautilus was relatively new. Art Jones had, basically just kind of created the Nautilus equipment, and gyms were starting to spring up that had, just kind of the Nautilus circuits. Ended up working for this gentleman, Biz Stark, who had, facilities in Pittsburgh, and just was hugely passionate about the physiology behind it and just training people to exercise properly. I remember there were certain machines that didn't do in the best technique. I kept slipping into worse and worse technique. One was the hip and back machine. He had different ways of motivating us to get to doing those correctly, where for me, it was just simply, hey, if you're not going to do it right, I'm going to give you back your refund your money and send you on your way, because my business depends on, people having good results. And if you're not getting good results, then, you're hurting my business. I'm like, no, I'll do it. And from then on, I got really, really good at doing that machine. I had a friend who, the way he motivated him was putting a Sharpie mark on his leg every time he did a rep incorrectly. And Dan left the facility with just a huge black mark on his leg. But I got to the point where I could be in a gym and hear somebody on that machine or almost any of the machines, and from the sound of the machine, know that they were doing the form incorrectly. And so I never saw that as a career. I eventually kind of thought in my head, I'd love to own a gym someday. And that was always kind of in the back of my head. So I got to college, I started in mining engineering and shifted gears from that for a number of different reasons. Finished with a geology degree, and it was going into my senior year when I did my geology field camp, and this was in the Greenbrier Mountains of West Virginia, some of the most beautiful area in the country. We'd go hiking. We would go out and do our sampling and data collection out in the field, and we'd fill our canteens out of this pipe that was coming directly out of the limestone. It was the coldest, cleanest water you could ever drink. And it was just beautiful, but it was like, this isn't how I see myself for the rest of my life, what I'm going to do career-wise. And one of the girls in the class, we were out working one day, and we're talking about all this and kind of life aspirations. And I talked about wanting to open a gym someday and talking about exercise. She's like, you should check out the exercise physiology program. My roommate's going into it. She has a biology degree, so I'm sure you could get into the master's program as well with a geology degree. And like, okay, I checked it out, and it's like, yep, this is what I want to do. And that just kind of propelled things further. I worked at a small school in Texas, kind of teaching physical activity classes at college level. And I had a mentor there, Dave Goethals, who the students jokingly referred to his badminton class as conditioning with a racket. He was very much into working the rotator cuff and the hips in every scenario in order to prevent injury. He was just really, really brilliant guy, very motivating. And from him, I got the inspiration to get my PhD and kind of go into academia. In the middle in there, I did a lot of personal training, struggled to really make a decent income there. I managed facilities. I've worked in corporate fitness. I worked in a lot of different areas. So I've seen the whole breadth of physical activity and exercise science, and just kind of really found more passion for teaching it as opposed to just simply implementing it. So that's how I got to where I'm at now. I'm actually hoping my students don't follow in my footsteps. I hope they surpass me and move ahead. And I do have a lot of students that I find myself learning from them. We had in one of the episodes, Sam Moore, who is now working on her PhD in exercise physiology at University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. And she is going to be a tremendous influence in terms of women's exercise physiology because she has a passion for it. Even though, I joke with her that, she comments that my class didn't inspire her as much, but it was because she didn't see herself in it. And it took her kind of realizing that she had to plant herself in the exercise physiology to really make it a passion of hers. And she's just going to be phenomenal. And I have countless other students that I could kind of go down the list that have I reach out to them for information sometimes now because I keep learning from them. And I think that's one of the important things as an educator is that we realize that we have so much more to learn. And our role is not to teach what we know, but to teach how we came to what we know and getting our students to challenge those ideas, exceed those ideas, and to kind of create their own thought processes and find new ideas because we're still in the early foundations, I think, of exercise science. We're learning more and more, particularly as it applies to aging and those types of things. And when I went through my master's program, exercise physiology, you had really about two pathways you could go, and that was corporate fitness or cardiac rehabilitation. The emphasis was always on cardio more than anything. One of the first jobs that I had out of my master's, I was working for a gym in Pittsburgh, and we had this promotion group in, and there was this guy, Dave Draper. And when I met him, I'm like, should I know that name? And he's like, well, you're probably thinking of the Dave Draper that was in the Beverly Hillbillies. He was a bodybuilder in the 60s. He made several appearances on Beverly Hillbillies and several other shows on television. And he's like, I'm not that Dave Draper. But he proceeded to kind of talk about, what he had done. He had been a strength and conditioning coach for, I think, University of Michigan, Michigan Panthers, and had a pretty solid career. And, we were just talking and he starts going off about, these exercise physiologists are all a bunch of 160-pound weaklings that have never lifted a weight in their life, telling you not to do full squats. And he's just going off. And I'm like, crap, he's going to ask me what my background is. And I have to tell him I'm an exercise physiologist. And so when he did, he did ask, he's like, so, what's your background? I said, well, I'm a master's in exercise physiology. And he looked at me and said, you're not like the rest of them. And I have taken that as a compliment throughout my career because as I've evolved and learned more, one of the things, and I've talked about this in the podcast, I talk about it to my students all the time. A number of years ago, I went to the American College of Sports Medicine conference, and they were honoring a bunch of the senior fellows these are exercise physiologists that have been some of the groundbreakers in our field. They're big names. They've done a lot of tremendous research. They've forwarded the field tremendously. But I saw them walking around, and these guys are like in their 80s, and they're all kind of kyphotic. They're shuffling. They didn't look what I want to look like when I'm in my 80s. And it occurred to me, it's like, these are the people that have been pushing cardio, and not the people that have been pushing strength and conditioning. And so I realized that, we have to put a lot more emphasis on the strength training, getting our muscles stronger so that we can continue to do many of these physical activities that we want to do as we are attempting to age well. And so that's kind of shifted my thought in terms of really pushing strength and conditioning, teaching people that are getting older to lift heavy, and heavy is relative. So it's not like, you're in your 60s, you need to be, squatting 500 pounds. It might only be heavy for you as 100 pounds, but it's heavier than what you were doing yesterday, and you're getting stronger and you're building that strength rather than simply trying to just go through a maintenance phase, maybe doing a little bit of light lifting and saying I'm resistance training, and you go out and maybe you are jogging, but you're not jogging as fast and as intensely as you did, a year ago, 5 years ago, and so on. And we want to see more maintenance of strength and cardiovascular conditioning as opposed to, hey, we expect this decline over the years. In fact, I was teaching exercise testing and prescription class in, I think it was like winter term, and I'm going over the norms for the bench press. And it just struck me as like, if I look at if I could bench press my weight in my knees, then I was considered average or fair in terms of my strength. Now in my 60s, if I can lift that same weight, if I can still lift my body weight, I'm like superhuman. And it's like, why is that? That shouldn't be the case. Okay, yeah, we can expect a little bit of decline as we age, but it shouldn't be that pronounced of a decline with aging. It should be more subtle, and partly because we just aren't pushing ourselves quite as hard as we would in our 20s. But we should still be able to maintain a fair amount of strength. And if we can do that, if I'm in my 60s and I can bench my body weight, then my likelihood of maintaining function well into my 80s and hopefully my hundreds is going to be much greater. Well, I really appreciate you joining me today, filling in for Corbin in his absence, but also kind of challenging me with some good questions. And, we just hope that you'll keep asking the questions and keep aging well. Thank you for listening. I hope you benefited from today's podcast. And until next time, keep aging well.